Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning into Soul Fuel. I'm your host, Stacey James. Today, we're going to be speaking with medical professional Kemkaren. We are going to be discussing his experience when he passed away. As an intuitive energy reader, I've had the opportunity to discuss many near-death experiences and death experiences with individuals from around the world. And I'm so grateful that Ken is here with us so that he can share what it is that he saw and felt that day. Hello, Ken.
Hi there.
Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about you and who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm a family physician, and I have also worked in emergency and ICU and critical care, along with other things too. I trained in Ireland at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, and I graduated in 1995, and I'm a single dad. I got 2 teenage boys, and I'm a musician too. So that's basically the rundown on me.
Oh, so you're a man of many hats.
So far.
Well,
I might need more depending on what my hairline's like.
oh, yeah. Well, if I take after my father, I might have that problem too. But here's hoping.
Hope not.
Yeah, right. In conversation, you'd mentioned that you were in a very tough space on your journey. And at the time of January 2014, that's when, things were really changing for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, back in 2014, I was about 7 years into a divorce, which was very acrimonious, and there were quite a few issues that arose that were quite frustrating. So I was dealing with a great deal of frustration and trying to survive and trying to move forward and all kinds of things. But it was definitely a trying time, and it was just very difficult, I think, for everybody, family and even friends too. So that was sort of the background of what happened, and basically just had a lot of conflict, which I found very difficult to manage, and caused a lot of anger and anxiety too. So that was what was going on basically.
Yeah, and that would be a lot to handle at one time for sure. And I imagine that looking for ways to juggle that emotionally must have been very trying to your being. Do you feel that those experiences ended up making you stronger or contributing to who you are now in hindsight?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I went through a tremendous, I guess, upheaval. My paradigm for living life was upended, and had to adjust. And I'd adjust to a lot of things, not just living circumstances, but also the legal circumstances that I was, that had befallen me,
Mm-hmm.
were such that I got a lot of correspondence and a lot of crazy stuff happened, and it really, I think, at a certain point in time, came to the realization that it didn't matter how much I worried about things; they weren't going to change. Like the outcome was something that I would have to wait for. And once I realized that I didn't have to worry about the outcome, basically my whole life changed, because and other people would be like, gee, if I got that correspondence, I'd be freaking out. And I'm like, well, we'll just have to see how it plays out. It's a piece of paper with black markings on it that says something that is about the future sometime. It's not necessarily about now. So, that's an example of sort of what happened. And I think going through the difficulties really taught me about being present and being less consumed with the emotionality of it, and being more focused on solving problems and staying as close to today as possible. And that really did help. At the same time, that situation evolved. That divorce actually took a total of 12 years to resolve. So
Oh, wow.
I'm glad I had those skills by then, to move forward. So yeah, I did change who I was into who I am, and I'm grateful actually, because There's very little that can upset me today. I can go through just about anything, and I don't really. It's not that I don't care. It's just that I'm, if there is an outcome that could happen. It's not that I want it, but I don't not want it either. So I'm neutral about most things. So that's what I learned from the whole experience, I think, really.
Yeah, you were given many different coping mechanisms that you were able to apply in so many different aspects of your life. I think that your perspective on it is really strong. I think that's fantastic, and I think there's a lot of us out there that can relate to that and would benefit from having some of those skills, right?
Right.
Definitely. No, I think that's amazing. And I mean, you had said that while you were facing all of that emotionally and so many sensitive parts of your life, you had said that that's when everything took another turn that would lead you into an experience that would change who you are forever. Can you tell us what happened that day?
Absolutely. Well, January 4th, 2014. Actually, I'll preamble a bit. On January the 1st, my oldest son, decided to leave his mom and come and live with me. And that was when he was 12 years old. So he just made that decision, and that caused tremendous upheaval. And, with my ex-wife, and she was very upset. And I guess I would have done the same. She phoned me to talk to me about it and to find out how I felt about it. And, sadly, that conversation escalated into an argument, which, made us both angry. And I ended up hanging up, and I couldn't take it. And everything was okay, I guess. On the 4th, she decided to call me again, and we just had a very difficult conversation. And I'm not blaming her either, because she was very emotional at the time, as I would be if I was in that situation.
Absolutely.
But I didn't take it the right way at the time. I had just sort of woken up, and I wasn't ready to deal with it, and I got very angry. And what happened was I got into fight or flight mode, because I was also frightened by the conversation, and my heart started to race. And when I finished the conversation abruptly, my heart was still racing, and it was racing very, very fast. And as I said before, a former emerge doc, ICU doctor, and all the rest, I knew that this was not good because it wasn't slowing down. And, it clocked in anywhere from 130 beats per minute all the way up to 200 beats per minute, and it was racing all over the place. And I was starting to feel some burning in my lungs, because I knew then I was going into heart failure. So I decided then to phone 911, which was the right thing to do. My girlfriend at the time was with me, and she was very alarmed and worried. And I said, "It's okay. I'm going to be fine. Let's just get into the ambulance and go." And so we went. And it was a weird situation, because they had very heavy flow at the hospital. They were backed up, and I ended up sitting in the ambulance bay. And I ended up sitting there for a couple hours, which is totally unusual that would happen. It would normally be, maybe 10 minutes or something. But I actually phoned the emergency doctor myself from my cell phone and said, "Dude, you have a patient in the ambulance bay with chest pain and a rapid pulse. You need to get somebody out here." And he said, "Well, who's the patient?" And I said, "It's me, man." "Dude, help me out here." And at which point a nurse came right away, promptly, and rolled me over to get an electrocardiogram done, like a heart tracing, to see what was going on with my heart rhythm. And the beginning, okay, so there were lots of things that happened in my mind before I got to the EKG machine, and that was, I was thinking about my kids. I was thinking about what happens if something happens to me. What if I die? If I die, what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my estate? What's going to happen to everything? I don't know, And I was very, very concerned about my kids and what would happen to them. And it was very emotional, but I was holding it together, to get my EKG. And the EKG lady, she was so sweet. She said, she knows a doctor, and she said, would you like to see your EKG? And I said, yeah, I would. And I looked at it, and I knew what was going on right away. I'm in atrial fibrillation with a heart rate of like 190. And I'm not feeling good. And I've been waiting for 2 hours, and I actually broke down and wept because I just couldn't help it. And the lady said to me, are you going to be okay? And I said, I'm just worried about my kids. That's all I'm thinking about. What's going to happen to my kids? And so right away, they grabbed the EKG. The nurse looked at it and just started wheeling me into one of the treatment rooms. And my girlfriend was there. She came in because she had been put in the waiting room and or whatever in the hallway. So she came in, and we had to discuss things with the various different junior doctors who came in, and they were all good. They were good people and all. But we had a discussion about how I was going to be treated, et cetera, which I won't bore you with the medical details. But they tried a drug on me that wasn't going to work because I had tried that drug once before, and it didn't do anything. Well, they cranked it in and gave me a whole bunch of metoprolol, which is like something to slow down your heart. I've been saying to the resident doctor, I said, I need to be cardioverted. I'm if we wait much longer, I won't be able to be. So I want to be cardioverted, which is to put the pads on your chest and then shock the chest wall and change the rhythm of the heart that way. And eventually, the teaching fellow, cardiology teaching fellow came, and he said to me right away, do you think you should be cardioverted? And I'm like, yeah, I think so. You might want to get to it. By now, about 4 hours has elapsed since I arrived at the hospital.
Wow.
And so they got me all set up, to do this. They put an IV in, and they gave me medication to knock me out. The standard stuff. I guess they were using propofol and ketamine to knock me out, and because you don't want to be conscious when you're getting cardioverted, it's very traumatic physically. So,
Definitely.
Anyhow, so I could feel the IV solution going into my arm and up my shoulder, and all of a sudden, poof, I was out, and I was unconscious.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have any way of telling you exactly how long I was unconscious for, but all of a sudden, I found myself bathed in golden, beautiful light that was intensely bright, and the light was also love, so it was light and love. They were the same. It wasn't different. And I was filled with joy, like absolute joy. And I was actually in a place. I wasn't like in a tunnel or any of that. I didn't experience that. I just was, all of a sudden I was there. And there were people walking around, and it was a beautiful meadow. And up in the distance, there was a forest. And there were people walking right in front of there, and I could see them off in the distance, probably maybe about 80 yards away, kind of thing. And people were dressed in all kinds of attire. There were, people dressed like the Puritans, like from, the American, Revolution period. And then there were people who were dressed in, modern clothing. But I didn't have time to really get that, detail, because I was so blown away by how I was feeling, which was this enormous, incalculable amount of love. It was just so intense. And I think the best way I've been able to describe it is that it was like a nuclear bomb of love, because it was both this bright light and love at the same time. That's the best way I can describe it. It was that big. And so that was sort of the first experience I was having, and I don't know how long that exactly lasted for, but about, I don't know, I'm going to guess, maybe that was about maybe 3 or 4 minutes. It's happening very, very quickly, you know?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, my frame of reference, like the whole scene just got jumbled. Like it'd be just like taking a TV or a television screen and shaking it back and forth, so you can't really see the picture. That's kind of what happened.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden, I was transported to a totally different place, like immediately. Like I was on, and it was like a flat white surface that was just enormous. It just went on and on. And the sky by then, which there was a sky that was really white, like very white, and that went to the horizon. So it was very difficult to see where the horizon was. It was like the two of them melded together, but I knew there was a horizon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I was trying to like figure out where I was in space, because I just needed to get a frame of reference of some kind. It just seemed like I was nowhere. And of course, at the same time, all the light and the love was still going on too. So I was kind of really overwhelmed, and I turned around 180 degrees, and about 40 yards, let's say, in front of me, there was a trapezoid type of structure that was black, that was, probably, it's hard to tell how big it was, but I was drawn towards it, and I went towards it. And when I got closer, there was definitely like a granite structure, like I said, like a trapezoid almost. Like, I mean, it had two sloping sides and a flat top, and the front was sloping a bit. And there was like not a stairway, there was like a step, like a ledge, and then there was just the surface that I was walking on below that. And there were 6 figures, kind of looking like statues, on the back ledge, and then there were 6 in front that were on the surface that I was walking on. And so I walked closer towards the structure, and as I got closer, I recognized that the figures were actually alive. They were people, and they were dressed in Egyptian attire, Egyptian deity attire, like not regular stuff, but that one of them had a staff and the other had this big hat, sort of. You'd have to look it up, but I mean, if you look up Egyptian
I can see it in my head.
You'll see it, right? Yep. I mean, I'm sure you know what I mean. But I walked closer and closer to that, and then one of the figures was, they were all women too, by the way. This woman in the back on the ledge, as I'm facing it on my right-hand side, took a step down and came towards me, and she put her right hand in my left hand and walked with me, and went up the side of the structure by stairs. There were stairs there. And we walked up, and just hang on. Sorry, I had an interrupting call. Anyway, so we walked up to the top of the structure. It wasn't like super high. It was maybe about 12 or 15 feet high, maybe a bit more. And on the top, there's a flat surface, and there was an oval-shaped pool with turquoise, the most brilliant turquoise water in it, and there were steps going in and steps going out. So she guided me through the pool of water. She wanted me to walk through the pool of water, so I did. And it completely immersed me, and I came out the other side and walked down the steps, and then she went right back to her place, and I was standing there, and they were just looking straight ahead, like, and I'm like, what's going on? What is this? What's going on?
Of course.
And then I got jumbled again. I came and walked around and faced them, and was just staring at them like, wow, like I was just amazed at what was going on. And all of a sudden, my frame of reference got jumbled again. And all of a sudden, I was in the hallway of the St. Boniface Hospital emergency room, just outside, where they have, chairs for people to sit in and stuff, and pictures on the wall and whatever. And I was in the hallway, and I went right up to where my girlfriend was, because she was in the hallway. I didn't know that she was, but that's where she was. And I could see her face. That she's a sweet little Oriental lady with, tears streaming down her face. Just, I couldn't believe it. I was like, why is she crying? What's she crying about? I had no idea why she would be crying. And then within, I don't know, maybe 10 seconds, all of a sudden I was up in the corner of the room, like where the ceiling and the walls meet, and I was in if you were in the treatment room and you were in the bed, it would have been on my right-hand side up in the corner. That's where I was. That was my vantage point and perspective, and I could see down on my body and my, treatment team. I could see the cardiology fellow, I could see the resident, I could see the respiratory therapist, I could see the emerge doc, I could see the nurse, I could see the treatment tray where they had everything, and I could see the pads on my chest. Well, one of the pads, because there's one on my back that I wasn't able to see, and I was staring down at myself going, wow, what is this all about? Like, I was amazed that I was looking at myself and the team, but I knew at that moment that, this was a real thing that I was going through. And because I was conscious, I had conscious awareness of my surroundings, and I had conscious awareness of the circumstances all of a sudden, right? Mm-hmm. And then the treatment team started to walk away. And I was still watching them. The emerge doc walked away, and then the respiratory therapist walked away, and the nurse stayed for a little while, and then everybody left except the cardiology fellow. He was still there. He was standing at the defibrillator where, he would have been making, pushing buttons to treat me. And he was just watching me. He was just looking at me. Wasn't doing anything. And I was just sitting up. I was sitting upright, leaning forward with my hands on my knees. I wasn't moving. And then all of a sudden, I was sucked right back into my body, just abruptly. And I was like, my whole body, all at once, I could feel my body all at once. And it was just like, wow. I couldn't believe I was back, and the love and the light energy was still with me throughout all that part. It was still with me as I was in that bed. Yeah. And they brought my girlfriend back to me, and she was crying, of course, and she looked exactly the same as I just seen her. And I tried to hug her. I wanted to hug her. I said, come here, let me hug you. Let me give you some love. Let me give you this love. I want to give you the love. I want to give it to you. And I actually said to her, I saw everything. And what I meant by that when I said it wasn't that I had seen myself getting treated, but I saw everything, meaning the expansiveness of the universe or something like that. It just was as much as I could say at the time. And I tried to give that love. And, after about maybe about 5 or 6 minutes, the love energy and everything started to fade. And I looked at the surroundings, and where it was this gray hospital thing, that environment, sort of gradually coming into focus, and it sort of took over what I was feeling, and the love just dissipated, and all of a sudden I was back to reality, I guess, whatever that means. So after that, I tried to explain to Dahlia, my girlfriend, that I had this experience, and I don't think she got it. I don't think that she understood me. And of course, I was still full of joy for quite some time. It took probably about an hour for the joy to dissipate, which was, I was grateful for that joy. And the emergency room doctor actually walked by me, and I said to her, "Thank you so much. Thank you so much." And I think that she thought that I was thanking her for the treatment, which I guess I was thankful for that too. But I was thankful for the experience of, whatever that was that I experienced, because it was so joyful.
Wow.
So that's the experience, and that's what happened. Now, on that day,
That's
I was
and that's
sorry,
unbelievable.
I was discharged home, and I was fine.
That's
I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. No. I was just saying that, I mean, that's an incredible, incredible experience. And a lot of what you describe is what you hear from individuals that have experienced experiences outside of their body when they've passed away. One thing that resonated with me in a big way was when you were talking about your vantage point, where you were positioned in the room watching yourself. I too have that experience because when I was a little girl, I was incredibly, incredibly sick. And they did not think I was going to make it. And I remember seeing myself, this little thing, I was maybe one, but watching myself from the corner of my room, up at the
Right.
top, in the hospital, with the white bed, and everyone was around me, and her little brown hair, and it's a memory that comes back over and over and over again. Um,
Oh, yeah.
and then I've heard so many people over the course of time, that describe their experiences that way as well. I did have another question for you, and it
Sure.
had to do with that first place, or well, I guess it would have been the second place that you ended up being in. Um, this endless area of white light. Now,
Mhm.
that is something that, again, resonates with me in a big way, because I've been there. So I'm just curious to know, did it look to you like almost like an endless environment? Like there was no wall, there was no. It's like this sea of the brightest, almost blinding light.
Yeah, well, when I got to that place, it was um, like I could feel the ground under my feet. Like I had like a physical sensation when I was there, and I could sense that there was. It seemed endless for sure.
Mm.
Like it just seemed like, but there also seemed to be almost a horizon, but it was hard to discern. So it to me was pretty endless. Like it was flat white, and of course that light was just, it was so all encompassing. It was there was no like no, I wouldn't say escaping it. I mean, it wouldn't say that you would want to escape it, but
Yeah.
there was no. It was relentless. Like it was just constant, and it was intense.
Yeah.
And that whiteness of that area that I was in at that point in time, it was actually intensified somewhat when I was there. That was the more intense part of it, I guess. And I mean, it was all intense. It's hard to gauge, but yeah, I got a sense of expansive um, endlessness, I guess would
Yeah.
be the right word for that.
Definitely. And it's it's so exciting to hear somebody describe that. I mean, I myself have always spoken about that as the in between, is what I call it, and it's a
Hmm.
place where when I'm working with people and accessing their loved ones, that's where I go to get them.
Oh,
So when
interesting.
I have reason to believe that that's where you were, is that in between, and it's a very, very, very beautiful place.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, yes, and that I would say that makes sense to me, and that resonates with me because that seems like what it was in between,
Yeah.
and it would have been, in between the Earth, sort of three-dimensional, whatever you want to call it. It's actually a four-dimensional space, but
Yeah.
um, if we can include time. But yeah, that part of the experience definitely, when I look back on it, is the most puzzling and the most interesting, and actually turned out to be pretty important later in my life. And after that experience, how that manifested is interesting. It's maybe another story, but at the end of the day, that was the most important part of it for me, to have experienced, because something definitely happened there that changed my life, because that is where the change occurred, right there. The whole experience would have changed anybody's life probably, but within the experience, that particular moment, I think, was one of the most important things that happened, because I remember it so vividly. Like, it's just so vivid and so real. I still look back on it, and I just kind of can't believe it. Like, I just can't believe I've been through that. What can I say? It was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. And it definitely is. Like, I feel excited listening to you talk about it. And I mean, you had said that prior to this experience that you hadn't really thought much about experiences beyond our bodies, but now you really look at things quite differently. Can you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, and looking back on, when I was younger, I had out-of-body experiences, which, I found fascinating and stuff, but, I really had not been a very religious person, and I suppose on a, day-to-day basis, wasn't really all that spiritual either. I didn't connect with that aspect of my being. I think probably because there are lots of reasons why. Sure, societal suppression of that, maybe, I don't know, whatever it is we believe in, with material and whatever. I was wrapped up pretty tightly in that realm of material and achievement and, approval, anything like that. And having experienced things that led to, resentment, anger, fear, largely things like, abandonment, betrayal, and, rejection, all those things that we experience in life had, I built up a sort of a shell around me, a protective wall. And even within, I would say, too, I didn't venture too far into my spirit. I went through my feelings and my thoughts, I suppose, but I didn't really give very much credit to the spiritual part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't know that it existed, or I had heard it. We hear about the soul, we hear about all these things spiritually, but, it's hard to really appreciate them coming from my background, largely a scientific background, although I'm sorry to segue out to tangentialize things a bit here. I had studied things like quantum mechanics and chemistry and things like physics, theoretical physics, and so on along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a sense of wonder about the universe, I suppose, but not in a truly spiritual sense, but more in a scientific way. So when this happened to me, it took me quite a while to process it and to try and understand it, and I really went into shock for quite some time. I was for several months. I still couldn't get my head around what had happened to me, because I really thought, like, maybe it was just my imagination, or whatever. I thought I didn't really. I knew it was real. Of course, I knew it was real, but I went through a process of trying to rationalize it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you, in the first 6 months of experiencing this, after experiencing it, I would tell people, because I couldn't believe it myself. I was like, you wouldn't believe what happened. And I just had to tell people. And sometimes I would tell patients this, which is an interesting other aspect to the whole experience for me.
Of course.
Never mind being just a regular guy, but what about being a doctor and looking after patients who might be dying?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What do I say to them? And do I share that? Is it ethical? Is it reasonable? Is it wrong? Is it right? I mean, do these people even give a crap about what I went through or what? But it was always something that I wondered whether I should share, and there were a couple times for sure where I did. And, a couple of times, well, more than a couple times since then for sure, but in that first 6 months I shared it, and, it wasn't entirely welcome. I mean, not everybody who I shared that thing with, they didn't all, some people thought, oh, that's interesting. Other people were like, wow, like yourself, like amazed and energized by it. Other people, so I found myself trying to validate my experience through sharing it with other people. And then I went through a process of I sort of went into a little bit of a depression over it, because I realized that not that many people go through this. I mean, there are a few, there are lots, I suppose, out there, but how many of them am I going to meet and talk to, in my life?
Yeah.
I did find a couple along the way, which, here in Winnipeg, but, largely felt quite alone with it. And then I found on Facebook some places to go and whatever. And actually, weird things started to happen, because certain people would give me information. I had a lady who came in with the book by Eben Alexander, and I believe he's a neurosurgeon who had a very prolonged near-death experience while being in a coma. And she brought me this book, and I read it, and I was like, well, I won't say exactly what it said. I mean, I was like, wow. When I read that, I was just like, holy crap, this guy is describing a lot of what I went through.
Yeah.
It was not as long as his was longer. Mine was only, according to the recess record, 2 minutes and 24 seconds, where my heart had stopped and they were trying to start my heart again. And so I was actually clinically dead at the time for 2 minutes and 24 seconds, which is getting long with no oxygen to your brain, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, thankfully they got me started up again. But, it took a while before I could actually feel at peace with it, because I really felt separate and distinct from everybody, and not in a good way, but in a very sort of sad way. Not because of what I had been through, but because I couldn't really share it with people and make them understand that we don't. At least in my opinion, we don't die. We don't do that. Our soul continues on to wherever it goes, and I know at least where mine went. I don't know if that's where it ultimately goes, but that's where it was. And it brought me to a place of understanding exactly what my soul is.
Absolutely.
Which is an entirely different, a totally different concept, I guess, if you want to call it that. But as an experience, I felt always that I needed to find my way back, to that place. And it happened that I ultimately ended up learning about meditation through various twists and turns on the road, the journey. After I got into the Facebook thing where I could see other people's stories and actually share my story, when that happened, then I was liberated from it somehow, because there were other people who had been through it and I didn't feel so alone. So that was very healing for me, because I was like, oh, okay, there are other people who do this and have experienced this. And so I felt better, and ever since then, since I started meditating, and trying to live in Zen, I've been getting closer and closer to re-experiencing that love by, having Satori moments, I guess we would call them Satori, where I'm actually merging with the spiritual energy of the universe. My soul is. With more meditation, I end up doing that more and more. And that's a super huge gift because, it's a totally different way of living. And I've learned that, the only way to really live is to be entrenched in the moment as opposed to, thinking about the past or the future. These are, things that actually feed, I think, the energy of fear that lives within most human beings these days. If not for all time, I don't know. But yeah, that's the big take-home lesson is we have a soul. It is a real thing, and we can nurture the soul through meditation and connecting with the universe. And
Absolutely.
in so doing, I have been delivered from all sorts of suffering in my life because I figured out that the suffering I experience happens to be because of what I think, which generates my feelings. So
Absolutely.
if I'm not, and what am I thinking? Am I thinking about tomorrow, what's going to happen tomorrow or next week, or what's going to happen with the bank in a month, or, what about my mortgage payment? What about this? What about that? What if this? What if that? Or I can go right back into the past and say, geez, what about this person who did that to me? And what about that person? And then, I can relive those experiences in my imagination, and I can generate feelings that way. But when I'm just focused on this instant, this moment, and I'm not thinking, then I'm delivered from my misery, because those are the things that cause misery, thinking about the future and the past. So, I'm grateful for that. It's a huge gift because I can go through virtually anything, and I can emotionally survive it. I don't know about physically. Sometimes it might not, but that's what I learned, and that's if more people can do that, then we can all be at peace, and maybe then we won't have to go and fire rockets at each other, that kind of thing.
Yes, and it'll bring us one step closer to peace. As a human race, and it starts within us. I mean, what you say about those thoughts, being connected to your feelings, and that's something that I talk about all the time. And I have had so many people be like, yeah, but it's like, no, 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 no. Like, what you focus on is going to grow. So if you want to feel good, then you need to be focusing on things that are going to help you feel good. And those feelings are going to happen within you, and then you're going to feel happy, and then your stress level is going to get reduced, and you're going to find joy, and you're going to be able to be more present, and it's all connected, So you're spot on there. This whole conversation is just exciting. And
Cool.
what's that? Sorry?
I said cool.
Yeah.
From the 1970s. Cool.
It's all right. I still pull out rad. And people are like,
Rad.
really? Did you just say that? I'm like, yeah, I did. And and one thing I was going to say was, or ask you was, because there's so much fear that is around the thought of dying for some, if you could give us your final thoughts on what would you say to a person that is afraid of dying?
Well, that's an interesting question because I've said many things to many dying people.
I know.
And it depends on the person and what they're willing to be receptive to. But in general, if I could, I would always like to reassure people that it's all going to be fine. It's going to be fine. You'll see it. It will be fine. Sometimes I have disclosed to people. Other times I don't get a chance to. But I would hope that we could start earlier than when people die to let them know that it'll be fine. And if I think with, I try my best even within my practice to try to make sure people are aware of something called mindfulness.
Absolutely.
And to try their best to stay in the moment, because people carry so much fear of life, never mind fear of death.
Yes.
So it's almost as though that needs to be the starting point. At least that's what I think, and that's what I do with people. If I don't always do that. I mean, in certain circumstances, obviously, but yeah, that's the thing. And when it comes to fear of death, I try to tell people, well, death is not the end of this. I always have to be very careful because I want to be sensitive, to people's cultural background and religious beliefs and all kinds of things, because we see lots of different people from many different cultures, walks of life. So it's hard to generalize. But if I had it my way, I'd make sure everybody knew.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. And what I meant was, if you could just say whatever you wanted to say and not have to worry about how it would be received, what would it be,
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Allow me a moment to reflect. That's a good question. I think it would be that there's no need to fear, because really all there is love in the universe. That's it. And I mean, love is everywhere in the universe. It's even here, but we dampen it down with fear. So I mean, it's hard to say. It's hard to say exactly, but I would love for people to know that this is not reality. And I know that sounds crazy, but this is not reality. This is our reality is actually what happens before and after death.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know if that's a good answer, but
it is.
That's kind of what I wish people would understand,
Absolutely. No, it definitely is. And I mean, I guess this is the sense of the reality that we know, because not many of us are conscious of the before, and we don't know what the after is, so that experience that you've had, I can't help but feel like you have so much purpose. I mean, I believe we all have purpose to begin with, but you have so much more purpose because you carry that with you, and to share that with individuals. And I'm so grateful that you were able to take the time to discuss this with me, and so we can share it with more people, because it'll bring a lot of hope, it'll bring peace, it'll bring excitement and wonder to so many people. So thank you so much for that gift.
Well, it's my absolute pleasure. And anytime.
Thank you. I'd love to extend a huge thank you out to Kemkaren for sharing this incredible story with us today. I sat there with chills up and down my spine through the whole thing. It was just incredible. If you have a story that you'd like to share, I would love to hear from you. Is it motivational? Inspirational? Have you overcome something? Have you experienced a miracle? A near-death experience? Have you actually died? I want to talk to you. Feel free to get in touch at info@soulfuel.ca. I am Stacey James. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, go fuel your soul.